getting on with the agenda. Item 1, any conflicts of interest to report?
No.
Moving on. Oh, sorry, Lee. Okay, with no mention. The previous minutes, any comments, clarifications, errors, suggestions for the?
They look,
Yeah, they look good. I'll second that.
Okay. So, motion to adopt.
Yeah, so then we all vote and
Okay. All in favor?
Yep.
Contrary? Okay, carried. So, item 3, update on the partnership possibility with Destination Stratford.
I believe that's me. So I have an update. So I'm going to actually just, Zach Gribble, so he's Destination Stratford. He goes, I'm all ears. We've been quite active with online mapping and are about to launch several self-guided audio tours using mapme.com. So some of their tours that they had before on paper are, and then he said a focus this year will include cycle tourism. So this project would be a good fit. And then he asked, what are the functional requirements for the digital version of the map? And so what I said to him is, we are just starting now looking at what we're going to do. So he sent me the link to mapme.com, but then I said, maybe I could get, there's the subcommittee here, or like the working group, we're looking at maps. So I said, what we do is we could set up a meeting with Zach to see what they're doing, what they're using, what we may want to do. And so I think, so I don't take up too much time, he's willing to have a meeting with us. So what I'll do is I'll send out a doodle poll to everyone who at the last meeting said they want to be part of the map project. And I'll find a time that works for everyone. And then we can have a meeting with Destination Stratford, because if they're actually building a lot of this stuff and we can piggyback on their work, I think that would be ideal. I did tell them that one of the things we were looking at was just not only in town cycling, but looking at maybe some of the destinations that are a short drive, like for mountain biking, but then also some of the road cycling routes. And he seemed interested in that. So I just wanted to give him a heads up that we were thinking more than just the in-town kind of maps and tours that they tend to do. So that's the status of that. So just keep an eye out for my doodle poll, and hopefully this month we can get together and start looking at and I believe that what they're doing, I believe that MapMe is also the same one that the Avon Trail, I think that's what Bernard said that they were using.
No, they use a different one.
Oh, do they use a different one? Okay, so maybe we can, I think whatever we do, we should align it with something. I mean, if Destination Stratford is going to use this and this is how they're going to do it, it might make sense for us. Anyways, we can have a look at, I'll send out, I don't need to send out a link to mapme.com, just go to mapme.com for those of you that are on the committee, and have a look at it before. And that's all, just keep an eye out for the doodle poll. And that's my update on that. It seems promising, at least.
Yeah, it sounds good.
yeah, it makes sense to check in with Bernard or somebody from the Avon Trail to see what they're already using, because even Destination Stratford might want to make sure that it works together well.
Yeah, and I think Bernard is on the mapping project. So what I can do is I'll send him the doodle poll as well. He'll be involved in that conversation, because I'm not sure that Destination Stratford has considered their walking piece. I did, sorry, I keep forgetting. I did tell Zach that we were looking at a layer that would be for walkers and hikers as well as one for cycling. So, lots to talk about.
When you talk about the Avon Trail, are you talking about the Stratford extension only?
I think Bernard is a representative of the whole organization that overseas. Like, I don't know what that is, a nonprofit of some sort.
Right.
Yeah, he's the rep, and they would also probably want to make it a little bit outside, especially if we're doing cycling outside of the area, just sort of in the surrounding, I don't know how much, but I would imagine like connections that could be made from Stratford logically.
Right, but our interest would be the Avon Trail, that Stratford extension, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Primarily.
Building it primarily from that, yes.
Yeah. The last couple of weeks, I decided to do the whole Avon Trail in Stratford, 2 walks with the dog, one direction, one in the other. And it's great to have maps, but there really isn't a lot of wayfinding information along the path.
That's because the blazes that they use outside of the city are blue on the Stratford Trail and white on the other end of the trail. But inside Stratford, they were not allowed to put those blazes. So there are no blazes in the city of Stratford.
But it's not a criticism on the Avon Trail, but within Stratford, possibly the city should have some standard that adapts, to city standards. And
Oh, and John, just because you're new to the group, there is a wayfinding study that was done, and there is a wayfinding strategy. It was done last year, and if Ms. Defoe is on, she could maybe speak to, because she was working with the Avon Trail people about integrating their marking with what the city had through the wayfinding project. And maybe at some point we can review that way just for, there are, I think 4 new people that maybe aren't aware of that wayfinding. So Tatiana, did you want to talk about it? Just because it occurs to me, I think there's at least 5 people here that might not be aware of that.
Yeah, so through the chair, thank you. Back in about 2019, we started a comprehensive wayfinding strategy for the city of Stratford, and we actually retained a consultant. So they came up with an overall strategy, and then the next steps for staff in 2020 were to develop an implementation plan and really refine the plan because there were some items that were missing. So one of the examples was the blazes and trail signage. So kind of really narrowing down what trail signage would look like in the city. Unfortunately, due to COVID and just a lack of staffing and resources in 2020, we didn't get that far. So we're hoping to pick it up this year. Both Nancy and myself have been working with the Avon Trail. They've provided us with some information. We're trying to consolidate that. And then what we'd like to do is make a presentation to this committee. We can also kind of do it a little bit more high level on the wayfinding strategy just for the newer members. Again, because of COVID and just a number of projects going on, I am a little bit behind in getting this done. But my goal is hopefully by the April meeting, we can have just an initial conversation with this group, because I do know you placed funds in your budget for some wayfinding signs. So we want to start talking to you guys about what that looks like for your budget, and then making sure that we're talking to the companies we're using to develop the signs. So that's sort of a high level overview. Happy to answer any questions. And if anyone has any feedback, I'll share the wayfinding strategy with this group via email tomorrow. And that way you can start reading through it and familiarizing yourself with it, if that's okay.
that's great. Well, being a newbie, it's good to know about this, but I was always curious about the Avon Trail, especially when you're walking along Devon, between the little path between the 2 houses to connect to that portion of the Avon Trail that's behind the Stratford Golf Course. I think there is a sign there, and then you're on your own.
Okay, so
So that's it. That's my update in a nutshell. So that's 3A done.
okay. On to the next topic, 3B, report card update. Is that you, Jody?
Yeah, that's me. Just before we launch into that, I probably should have mentioned this before. We have Anna Stratton is here with us. She's on this side of me on my screen. But anyway, welcome to Anna. She is our unofficial, as of yet, E&E rep for ATAC. So she's on the E&E committee. And we had a discussion at our last E&E meeting about somebody becoming a rep, but we did not find somebody to nominate. But after the fact, Anna checked her schedule and she realized that she could actually come to the ATAC meetings. So she will be nominated next week at our E&E meeting, and then she'll be an official voting member of ATAC. So welcome to Anna.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Nice to be here.
Hey.
Well, I suggested, because it's always hard to get people to sign up, I thought it should be something the vice chair of E&E just takes on, so that there's always a representative. So we'll see how that flies.
I think that's a great idea. And since Anna is the vice chair, she then nominated herself. So that was perfect. Worked out really well.
Quite frankly, nobody else volunteered.
Well, there you go.
But I'm happy to, and nice to meet you all. Thank you.
Excellent.
Now, I'm very new. Environment and energy, or
Yeah.
okay,
Energy, environment,
Energy
yeah.
and
energy
environment.
environment. Thank
It's
you.
another advisory committee.
Right, because some of what energy and environment does overlaps with what we do. So it's good to have a couple people that can make sure that we're kind of moving in the same direction. So thank you to Anna. Okay, so report card design. So what I did was I looked at some of the report cards from other places, and I pulled out the information that I thought we could put on our report card. I didn't think ahead and actually send it to you all, but I did. If I'm going to attempt to share my screen and show you what I have so far, and maybe we can discuss. Okay, so how does this work? Desktop 1, huh? Okay. Oh wait, no, that one. Ooh, it worked.
Very good. Wow.
Okay, so I just pulled out some information. There might be typos in here. I was typing kind of fast. So what we're kind of looking at right now is the measures of success. So what do we really want to see measured so that we can see what kind of progress we're making? So I went to our old, it was a very rough report card, and we did have quite a bit on there about infrastructure. So that's one thing we've been focused on. So I've got total length of bike lanes, kilometers. I put the where we are at number. I think it's a little bit more than that, but I'm not 100% sure if that includes the short street new bike lanes that we have or not. Multi-use trails, paved shoulders, and then kind of pedestrian stuff, length of the sidewalk network, percentage of streets with a sidewalk on at least one side. So that's our goal for most residential streets, is to have at least a sidewalk on one side. If I'm not mistaken, we're kind of in the 90% mark. I think we're quite high on that list. We don't have too many streets left with no sidewalks at all. And then I added in percentage of arterial roads with sidewalks on both sides. So looking to make sure that all the busy roads have sidewalks on both sides. Number of crosswalks, or I think engineering calls them crossovers now. Pretty sure we just have 2. So we can take a look at what targets that we want. Number of permanent city bicycle parking structures. Oh, sorry, percentage of city facilities with bicycle parking. So I was thinking buildings, facilities being buildings and parks, and so we have to quantify exactly what we're measuring there. And then the number of permanent city bike parking structures. So those are the things I thought about for infrastructure. I still need to gather up some of the numbers. Can anyone think of anything else infrastructure wise that we might want to measure?
So, Jody, there was within our accessibility built environment, there are targets that we have to meet in terms of not just sidewalks, but curb cuts, and there's accessibility standards on our pedestrian infrastructure. And I know that has to be tracked for AOTA, but I think that would be an interesting thing. And I think it's just directly portable over, I think, because engineering, or I'm not exactly sure who tracks it, but I think it's engineering has to track it anyways.
Right.
That might be an interesting one.
Right, like curb cuts and that.
Curb cuts and those kinds of things, right?
Okay.
And curb cuts and those, like, yellow bumpy thingies that they put on.
Right, the visual.
Yeah. And so, because it's one thing to have sidewalks, and it's another thing altogether to have AOTA accessible sidewalks, right?
Right.
AOTA compliant sidewalks.
Do we want to have that measurement as well then, like percentage of AOTA up to AOTA standard sidewalk?
Something like that. I know that there's I think there's specific terminology within that built environment piece of AOTA. We might as well just copy from that, because then it's, rather than making it up.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I'll have a look at that. Okay, and also, I mean, I know this is very quick, so I will get this, or maybe I'll ask Nancy, because she has a copy of it now. She could email it out to everybody. That way you can have a look at it afterwards. And if you think of something, you can always email me.
The other one, sorry, Jody, I was gonna say
Yep.
the other thing was benches. Something that other municipalities track for walkability is that our downtown core is lousy with benches according to what the standard is for so many benches every so many meters. I know that we've started adding benches when we redo, like on Valentine, there's a bench and they're starting to add benches throughout the city. That would be an interesting one to track over time, how many benches outside of the core the city has put in, because that makes, certainly for people with mobility issues, allows them to walk a little bit more.
Right. Okay, so I've added the benches in as well as the accessibility standards. So the next one is, I called it connections. So how do we link up with other things, as well as maybe connecting with work? So I can get these numbers from our transit department. Number of people taking transit, I guess we'd get a daily average ridership. Percentage of bus stops that are accessible. Percentage of bus stops with shelters. Number of people walking to work. So I just went to the census information, and it told me that 1,290 people said that they are walking to work. So the good news is that there is another census coming up this summer. However, we're probably not going to get the data for a little bit after that. So we may or may not be able to actually set a goal or target for that. I don't know. Are there any other connections that we can think of that might? So we're basically trying to make the active transportation network connect up with other pieces of transportation.
What about commercial activity? For example, people walking, cycling for shopping. I don't know
Right.
if that data is accessible, but
Shopping.
I don't know that the census tracks that. I think they do it for commuting. But one of the things we were talking about is doing a survey with the transportation plan, including updating the bike and pedestrian master plan. And maybe that's one of the things we can flag to ask.
Yeah, if we do a survey, then maybe we can get
We can
an average or some sort of data on how much, like commercial, do we want commercial, industrial, that kind of breakdown?
Tourism, yeah.
Okay.
Maybe if you're measuring, you'd be on a street, so it'd probably just be like how many pedestrians are using that street within a certain time frame, and be some sort of rate like that. But I don't know that you'd like intercept and interview everybody on the street to find out like their purpose of their journey.
Yeah, it'd be hard to do. And I guess it depends how we're collecting this data. I mean, if we were talking to, general population and getting a percentage of, how many people would walk to go shopping, that might be a little easier, but I don't think that's the kind of surveying we're going to be doing, but.
well, perhaps the Chamber of Commerce can provide some of that information.
Maybe, yeah, but I can reach out to them. Okay. Any other connection ideas?
What about the new regional intercity transit? Is that something that we would be interested in finding out? How much does that?
The ridership on that too?
Yeah, how that is going.
Okay, yep.
This is more of a general question. I'm not familiar with your style of buses, but how like amenable are they to taking your bike on to the next stop?
Or
Yeah,
bike
that's
racks on the buses, right?
Yeah, that's a good
There are?
question. Or do we
I
have
don't
any?
think there are.
Okay.
So the funny thing, it's a bit of a funny thing. We asked about racks on the buses. And at one point, I don't know about the new buses, but this was a while ago, the buses that we had before just fit into the garage and we couldn't put the rack on. But it may be possible as Mike Mosley is ordering new buses, maybe one of the things we could flag is, do they now allow a bike rack on them?
Yeah.
It would be interesting to get that on the intracity, or the people coming from other cities to be able to bring their bike to ride here in Stratford. That would be really ideal.
Actually, on that note, I tried to do that with the Via train, and there are some Via trains that allow it and some that won't. And I don't think the one that comes to Stratford has a place for your bikes, but I think the route that goes to London did. And this was obviously back when we were taking trains. That's maybe an interesting note even to Via Rail as well, to promote people bring their bike on the train. Right now, I don't think it's equipped, but that might be wrong too.
Right. And the other thought kind of this report card as well. I mean, if we find that it, or if we feel it's a priority, like for instance, putting bike racks on city buses, then we could put it on this report card and put a goal, like we can put it on there and say there's 0 right now. And then we have a goal in 2 years, we'd like to see, 2 or 4 or whatever. Just a thought.
One of the report cards that was really quite nice, it had a bunch of statistics that they were tracking, but then at the bottom of the report card, it had things that we'd like to see. And so that would be where you could add something like bike racks on buses, right?
Right, right.
Like if we have a section that is
Future,
what we're asking
future
for, right?
goals.
Or future goals, and then it doesn't even have to be something that gets tracked. It's like, yes, our buses now have bike racks. Well, that's not something you're going to track over time. It's just something you asked for and got, right?
Right. That's a good idea. Okay.
Do we know?
The other one is bike parking at the terminals and at the transit points for the.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we know if the intercity buses allow you to take bikes on?
I don't think they do. Just having just seen the size of the bus, it doesn't look like they have any accommodation for bikes. It's not a regular size bus. It's
where are they based out of? Where is the station in Stratford?
It's the transit station. So the
okay,
city bus.
so the city bus station. Okay.
And it's the bay right at the end, that extra bay that they put in, they're using for the two, because there's the county service, and then there's the regional service as well, and they both use the Stratford Transit hub as a hub.
And there is some bike parking there already. Okay, so next I had something which they called culture, or I just grabbed that from Signage. But I thought it was kind of a nice way to sort of say, how are we sort of promoting some of these things? And then that's where the wayfinding kind of came in, although that could probably come under infrastructure as well. So I wasn't 100% sure about the number of public wayfinding displays versus total length of signed walking routes. Maybe that's the same thing. I'm not quite sure. The only number I knew from the statistics we already had was we have the 3 kilometers of signed cycled routes in Stratford. So, and I know that we have a goal to get some of the routes signed sooner than later.
Yeah, I think some of the signed cycling routes is more like rather than just actually the it's more like the tour, like the festival route that we had. Like we had those 2 routes that Cycle Stratford did. I think under culture it means more like those kinds of, like, we have a red loop and a green loop, and so it builds in about cycling culture that way. So I don't know that we technically have any right now in that way. But walking tours, we certainly have those walking tours and the number of tours and things like that.
Right.
I'd like to see if we're doing annual walking or cycling events, like we do have the Perth County Cycling Tour, but the other one is how many bike rodeos we put on for the kids. Like, it's not Rotary, it's
Optimist place.
Optimist. Are they going to be doing their bike rodeos, like those kinds of things? Is Cycle Stratford going to do their Canada Day ride again? Like, I think those are the kinds of events that would fit into this.
Right. So would we count things like fundraising 5Ks and stuff and those type of things, or not?
I think so.
I mean, they're not directly promoting walking or cycling, but that's what you do when you're raising money. So
Yeah, and I would think also that one of the, I mean, you just even when you look at the coldest night of the year, right? But I think the other one is like Car Free Fridays. So
Right.
if the downtown business merchants do the down, I mean, they've done them how many years in a row now, but the Car Free Fridays kind of things, I think those are the kinds of things that help build walking culture, right?
Right. Yeah. So we want to track those and perhaps set some goals. Around safety, I was looking for I know we had a report on those statistics before, but I probably had them electronically and didn't keep them in a good place. So
I'll send it to you.
you have them, Kathy?
Yeah,
Okay.
and before I send it to you, I can send it off to it's the deputy chief sent them to me. I can see whether he can update it. It was to 2019. He can easily enough update it. It's also vehicle pedestrian, but it's also bike pedestrian.
Okay.
They actually, and they track bikes that hit cars, which is kind of funny, but there was one with a bike. But yeah, I have the one, but maybe what I can do is send it over and have them updated so that everyone has it.
So I'll add bike and pedestrians to that. Are there any other safety things that we want to know about that are data trackable, I guess?
Bike thefts?
Oh, right.
How did you forget that?
I don't know. Well, I guess technically it's not a safety issue, but it's an annoying issue.
It's important to cyclists, right?
Yeah.
What about pedestrian bicycle collisions?
Yeah, I need to add that.
Yeah, those
Okay.
are tracked as well.
Right. So those are some of the things I thought makes sense for us to measure. We don't want to bite off too much. The other thing, of course, being that it's structured as a report card, yet we would need some goals, so in the first year, we may not have a how we are doing column because, we only have where we're at and a target, but we don't have that any measurable time in between. But yeah, I don't know what we want to pick for a target year because this is the year that we're redoing our master transportation plan, which will have a active transportation component in it. So I don't know what people feel that we could set as a target.
Unless, or like with some of these, I guess you could look back several years and the numbers would still exist to just say, hey, this is how far we've come. And then when the actual new plan comes, it might be a bit easier to set targets because hopefully there's maybe budgets committed to and you're expecting certain outcomes. I'm not sure how that will work exactly, but one idea is maybe just to make it retrospective instead of like future facing for this one.
Right, that's true. So add another column to kind of say, let's just pick 2016 because we have census data and we could put where we were then and then have this year's numbers.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a digging, so it kind of doubles the workload perhaps.
It doesn't
one
really,
idea.
We were tracking a good chunk of this, like for AOTA, it's all been it's yearly reports. And also we were already tracking a good number of this in that old report card right back to the beginning of the bike pedestrian master plan from 2015. So, or 2014 or whatever. So all of that data is there. We just have to pick a date from when to start.
Yeah, I was just thinking 2016 is nice. It's 5 years ago. So we can kind of see how far we've come in 5 years. And then maybe we can leave the how we are doing column. I don't know.
Well, the how are we doing can just be a trend with an arrow up or an arrow down with in a percentage.
Yeah, that's what I think one of the other ones had, doing well or, on track kind of thing or not so great.
Yeah, a lot of this for me maybe depends on what our end goals are too, I guess, right? And maybe that is going back to things like the budget and the master plan that might be getting revamped might have some of those overarching goals from which we can then have our benchmark at the beginning and then measure towards, depending on what the timeline is for that. Because how many miles of bike trails I would like to see versus how many miles of bike trails the city's willing to budget for might be two very different things.
Yeah.
And so I don't think the city would like it if we held them to our greatest hopes versus what they might feel is realistic.
Yeah, you're right. This is a report card to measure against what was the bike and pedestrian master plan, which is now going to be revised and updated. So we don't want to set those goals based on the other plan, which kind of didn't get followed in a direct way. Like it was bits and pieces here and there. So it's especially hard to measure because it wasn't sequential.
Yeah.
We can normalize the numbers and benchmark against other similar communities.
That's possible. Kind of a aspirational kind of, this is what, it'd be really great if we could work towards this great bike friendly community sort of idea.
Well, if there are other communities with 30,000 people and they have X bicycle lanes and we're below that for the population, maybe we should be at the number that is the average, for example.
Yeah, and we usually tend to pick, there is like a group of about 8 communities, so we get compared to. You also want to be sure that you choose the tracking is a single tier municipality, because if you go to an upper tier, then it includes the region and includes different funding. We ran into that problem one time where everybody, excuse my language, their heads exploded because we didn't apply for a grant, but we were single tier and could only actually apply for 25,000. But Woodstock got 1.8 million. Well, no, they didn't. Oxford got 1.8 million because they were a region. And again, we have to be really, really clear about choosing the communities that are our comparators. And so there are we usually, Aurelia, some of that kind of community, but then it gets difficult because then if you choose we just have to choose them well, and so that they're truly comparable. I think that's the thing, because we'll either look really, really good or we'll look really, really bad, but will it be relevant? And that's my concern with comparators, right? It's like you can choose your outcome, right?
Mm-hmm.
Gotta make
Well,
sure
you can cook your results.
Yeah, make sure it's apples to apples, right?
So I guess what I'll do then is I'll incorporate all the suggestions from tonight into the report card, and I'll try to fill out statistically. So, and maybe I'll do the 2016 numbers and then this year's numbers, and then we'll figure out something for that last column. That might be a little harder to get the comparator numbers. So I'll start with our numbers 5 years ago, our numbers now. And then maybe we can decide after that, because that's probably enough for me to do in 1 month, I guess.
Yes, probably.
Just going to the report card under safety, would it be reasonable to include something to the effect of the speed limit for vehicles?
That crossed my mind too.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea.
Proportion, within, I know engineering does have metrics that they use, like proportion within 5 kilometers of the speed limit, sort of thing. Or, well, yeah, it depends what your goals are, I guess. If you wanted lower speed limits, which I think that ship's probably sailed, I probably shouldn't even bring that up. Sorry.
It actually,
we can resale it. Don't worry.
No, it hasn't sailed because it was incorporated into the. I had a meeting with the police chief and deputy after that whole little debacle, and it was the idea of bringing it into community safety and well-being plan and to relaunch it. They were quite interested in actually having that discussion. I'll say that, for example, we got unanimous support and police buy-in to start enforcing around school zones, and it was easy to do. I think we all just had to start being on the same page, and I'm not sure that we were communicating particularly well. I just think all the pieces hadn't gelled. I think we may be better now.
Yeah, I'll have to think about what we want measured there, but I'll consider what we want to put in there for speed limits.
I'm not in disagreement with what we have, but it's very morbid. We're talking about collisions, counting the numbers, and there must be other metrics. And I think safety is very important for people to become very active in the community. They want to feel safe.
Right.
Yeah, I thought about maybe even changing the title from safety, like when we were talking about actual injuries and collisions. I'm like, well, that's kind of the opposite of safety. But I don't have a great, other than calling it collisions. But then also there was the theft part, which maybe does tie into safety. So I don't know.
One of my pet peeves in the city is the adherence to the truck routes. Every time I see a transport truck rolling through the city, well, it's one of my pet peeves.
It's one of mine too, but there doesn't seem to be a lot we can do about it.
Well, it's about policing.
No, it's not. No, it's not about policing. It's about the province. So this
Is it?
Yeah, this comes up over and over again because those are connecting links roads. They're provincial highways. We've brought this up over, and this is something we have to take up with the province. So this isn't new. Like, this comes up, it rears its. So if you see a truck on Ontario or Erie or Huron, that's a connecting link. That's a provincial highway. We don't control goods that travel on those roads.
But so our truck routes have no enforceability?
They're a suggestion.
There's suggestions, and so we have no truck zones throughout the city where trucks aren't allowed to be, and we can enforce those. But enforcing trucks on the connecting links, the provincial highway pieces, is not something that, from what I'm given to understand, we're able to do.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting and frustrating.
Yeah. I mean, we could bring it up for conversation again to see if there's another angle to approach it. I don't know. I was thinking even through downtown on Ontario Street, those, especially we're going to narrow where Ontario meets Huron, that the speed limit should be down to 40 or 30. And would that discourage trucks coming through? Maybe not. I don't know.
The province is quite willing to let it. So when Huron came up last year, when we did Huron Street for the crossing at Huntington for the students, the province is quite, from what I gather, we're quite amenable to allowing us to set lower speed limits. They just were not that interested in not having. I think who was it? It was either one of our engineers a couple of years ago at one of these meetings. Kind of went, you have to understand what the province does is move goods. That's their view of roads. And so once you understand it, so they were though better about the speed limit. So we could maybe have an angle from that perspective.
Yeah, if we put the speed limit down and then we had a few enforcement days where we reminded trucks that they needed to go a lot slower, maybe that would help discourage them from coming through. I mean, there's so many lights to stop at already. You'd think that it wouldn't be as easy for them, but I don't know. I don't drive a truck, but I did nearly get hit by a truck recently. So in my car, not on a bike, thankfully. But yeah, wasn't pleasant. And it was on Ontario, right where it meets Huron. So yeah.
Well, it's never pleasant being up against a large vehicle.
No. Yeah, you don't win. Okay, so any other thoughts on the report card draft? So I'll just run back with it and fill in more of the blanks, and we'll go from there. So I guess I can hit this button here. There we go. Okay, so that's the report card report.
Great. Anything else on that one? No. Okay, moving on, new business. Project priorities for discussion at Accessibility Advisory Committee meeting in April. So I recall that we were providing some of the sidewalk recommendations at one point. Is that part of what's continuing going on, or are there other aspects that I missed?
We do two different sessions every year. One is to discuss pedestrian infrastructure, and we do it first because then we usually a couple representatives from this group attend an accessibility advisory committee, and we all talk about pedestrian linkages that we'd like to see. And then those, we just do a joint sort of recommendations to staff. So I think today's is to talk about where we flag pedestrian issues around the city and where we'd like to see things fixed. And we usually just open it up the floor to people to say, so just so you know, the hospital one is being done. So from St. Vincent to John Street, so we don't have to flag that one again. And the piece on Mornington, completing it from Graf up to, what is it, from McCarthy to Graf will be completed this year as well. They had to buy some property along there to finish it. So those are two pieces that are being done. And Erie Street is now done as well. So just so you know, just because some we don't want to flag those again, but any others would open the floor.
Well, there was the one that kept coming up, was the Delamere to, what is it, Water Street? There's the little, what, 100-meter stretch there. There's a very active sidewalk on both of those streets and nothing connecting them. I came down there today and there was, yeah, I came down yesterday and there was a school class coming up and they had nowhere to go. And there was a truck blocking Delamere, so people were taking it as an alternate. It was a little bit exciting.
That's Martin Street, so we can flag that again. That's a perennial, but we can bring it up the list. I live just around the corner from there, so I know that one.
Yeah, it's a busy spot. Right? People converging from different areas, right? So yeah, I think that's an important one. Well, one of my perennial pet peeve favorite spots is Foreman. So where Foreman and Huron meet. So there's a sidewalk on one side and not the other. So if you're coming along Huron and on your left is the Shell station and across from it is the Tim Hortons, there's no sidewalk on the Shell station side. So what's happening is pedestrians, if they're going in that direction, they have to cross Foreman, and then they have to make their way through all the cars that are waiting for the drive-through lane at Tim Hortons. And it's just kind of a nightmare. Or they walk on the road, which then, and there's cars usually lined up on the road, and then there's people trying to drive around those cars while there's people walking on the road as well. So it's a bit of a nightmare. It's one of my pet peeves.
I think someone was hit there just recently.
Was there? Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised.
Last couple of years. No, it's a disaster.
Did the Huron Street reconstruction report's coming soon, and so
maybe that'll be a piece of that.
But I'm just wondering whether we need to, maybe this is where we've gotten out of the habit of making motions, but maybe rather than waiting for next year's budget before this gets ahead of us, maybe Jody, you could make a motion that on the Huron Street reconstruction project, they make a special note of the safety and pedestrian issues at that intersection. Because if they're going to be reconstructing that whole road, you can add a stretch of sidewalk that gets you up as far as Norman or whatever, at the very least, right?
Yeah, and then both going the other direction as well towards the high school would also be important.
Yes, so I'm just wondering if we want to flag that now formally so that we can.
Yeah. Well, I would make make a motion here in committee and then.
Yeah,
sure.
Just a recommendation to the Huron Street reconstruction to flag that intersection as particularly dangerous for pedestrians because of the lack of sidewalks.
That's the motion I'm making. Kathy can second it. And she.
Well, you brought it up.
I did bring it up.
You brought it up.
I worded it very well.
I'm just realizing that we might be able to get something done sooner than later. Is my point, right? So.
Yeah. Okay. So I made the motion.
So John seconded.
Okay.
John seconded already. Okay. All in favor? Good. Opposed?
There
Okay.
you have it.
Any other locations that that members know about?
Yeah, around schools, there's also a couple of, there's a, also on Foreman, right in front of the high school. There's no sidewalk on the high school side. So it's just weird to me that people can't walk out at, like, if they want to, well, they're not supposed to stop there and drop their kids off, but you know, even if you're coming down from the neighborhood that's to the east of there and walking towards the school, you're forced to walk in on the driveways that the cars use, and then walk across, which is just weird.
Well, the dynamics there have changed also with the realignment of the high schools. So there's a larger population of students and traffic, and so that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's a busy road. So
Mhm.
I would think having that piece, and I think it's only by the school, that block, that's the only spot that's missing. So that's another one of my perennial favorites to mention.
The other thing that happens right at that same spot is the bicycle lane disappears. And all of a sudden, there's no bike lane anymore when you're coming down Foreman going south. And I find that kind of unsettling for cyclists.
The road's wide enough to handle a bike lane as well.
It seems like it.
It's,
Yes.
I think it's almost, it just needs a couple of, it needs like another meter or something, I think, to have a bike lane on both sides safely, which is a
Yeah.
pain.
It's not wide enough to have a, what is it, book 18 or book, whatever the MTO book is on, it's either 15 or 18. It's not wide enough for formal bike lanes. So they can't paint the lines and call them bike lanes. Or with the, well, they can't, the engineer won't sign off on it. So that's the issue that they have along that length of Foreman.
Makes sense.
But I would argue that one of the things is you do have bike lanes to come in behind this, and then on Short Street, you should be able to actually flow kids back to parking safely, and move them away from the front of the school. So we should be encouraging them to use this safer path into the school anyways, because the front of the school's a mess with the school buses and everything else, right?
Yeah.
Not that you want to, I mean, they should be able to use whatever road is there. I agree. But at the same time, if we can't put in some dedicated cycling there, maybe have a way to funnel them to the side of the school from where there are bike lanes.
And then my third favorite is it Worsley, where it comes down Birmingham and Worsley. So it's right where you turn to kind of go behind Central, and the parking lot is there. There's just a little piece of sidewalk missing from Birmingham to the parking lot of the school. And I was thinking, even if I was, of course, walking there the other day, two things I noticed. One is there were huge snowbanks, and yet on top of the huge snowbanks, there were trails where kids walk on top of the snowbanks on the people's property. And I noticed one of them, actually my friend Margaret lives there, they walk right up on her lawn to get by. So they're using that anyways. I was walking on the road because I didn't want to climb over the snowbank to get to the sidewalk on the other side. So the kids are using it. And the other thought is just to have that piece end at the school parking lot. There are no trees. There are city signs and there's some grading issues, but there's no trees in that little stretch. So that's another one. Again, I live in that neighborhood, so I'm walking there all the time, and it really annoys me.
But that makes total sense to put a sidewalk there.
Yeah, because I mean, there's kids are walking, right? That's a heavy pedestrian area, and when they get out of school, it's also a heavy vehicle area because that's the parents are no longer allowed to go to the front of the school. So they have to go around the back. And so there are a lot of cars, buses, everything.
And it's not that the city hasn't looked at it, it just involves expropriating property.
Yeah, and there
yeah,
was a giant tree there too.
Yeah,
a few years ago.
They've looked at it a couple times because we keep flagging it, but it would involve expropriating somebody's property. There isn't enough property there owned by the city to put in a compliant sidewalk, so it would involve expropriation. And so I think it just keeps getting shuttled down because, you know, that's all. I mean, the house there is pretty close already to the road, so yeah.
What about suggesting making it a one-way street?
It's possible, but it's actually, I was looking at it, I think last year I looked to see what it's designated. It's designated as a residential. It's not even like a secondary road. It's but it really is, because I think the traffic volume would tell you that a lot of people use that as
it's a shortcut.
Yeah.
Do you know what happens when you make streets one way though?
It messes everything else up.
Well,
right?
it increases the speed.
Increases speeds, right?
Yeah, true.
So that goes back to the coroner's report on pedestrian safety, that that one of the ways that you get increased like one of the children hit by cars is one-way streets. So I can understand putting in one-way streets for being able to add walking, but then when you have the crossing issues, right? So I'm always very, very wary of requesting one-way streets because of the increased speeds. I'm not sure, because, and this is one of the things we do, and again, Sarah and I, when Sarah was from the health unit, one of the things we always do is we always flag the issues that we have in our neighborhoods. Unfortunately, the people on this committee tend to live in neighborhoods that are all seem to be north, you know, certain areas of the city, and we seem to have neglected over the years huge swaths of the city that are on the, I would say, south and east end. So, and we do it all the time, and we keep saying we're going to figure out how to not do it, and yet again we're doing it. So I'm just throwing it out there. If anybody has some spare time to do some walking or driving or riding their bikes in that southeast quadrant of the city, I'm pretty sure they would appreciate somebody flagging some of their pedestrian issues. But we just haven't seemed to have any, and when we've done surveys, by and large, surveys have also been, right, when we've had the workshops, they tend to be all the same people somehow, right? And I do worry a little bit of that, you know, equity issue if this group is always advocating for improved infrastructure in areas of the city and other areas don't get any.
Well, it seems that there was a common theme. All the areas, a lot of the areas revolved around schools or close to schools. Perhaps we should look at the school areas and the park ground areas in the south and east end as a start.
And those are already being done, right? Like that's already, the staff are working with the police on those, around those issues. So, and we've already done the school travel planning, which flagged infrastructure issues, like all the schools got done, and all the pedestrian issues directly around the school have been flagged. It's more as you get, so because we did we had the grant to do the school travel planning, we did that. What we haven't done is a little further out from there, right? Some of the neighborhoods that don't have a school directly in there.
Yeah, the only one that occurs to me that people have brought to council before, complained about too, is the speed along Duro for pedestrians crossing. And I guess there is a couple of spots where kids would cross to go to school. And they've asked for the speed limit to be lowered along Duro and also for crosswalks, but it never seems to warrant that. Like they look at the numbers, it's not enough.
Is it 50 right now?
Is it 40?
There's chunks of it that are 40, just people don't drive 40 on it.
Yeah.
It's again an enforcement issue.
I remember I just discovered that street recently, and it's pretty wide open space, isn't it? There, like it just doesn't feel like you should need to go slow. Or
Sounds like there's room for bike lanes then.
Well, in the older section of town, it's quite narrow, and then it kind of
Oh.
widens up later. But
Okay.
Oh, and yeah, the wide section of Douro, though, because of the amount of truck traffic, we have not recommended bike lanes. We've recommended an off-road bike. That's already on the list. It's an approved list. Is from Romeo all the way over to CH Meyer. So if you can imagine that entire stretch, that eventually will be a multi-use trail along there, because the truck traffic along there, even though it's nice and wide, we'd never put bike lanes on it. It's just not, it would be too unsafe for bikes. So that's an off-road cycling.
That's
The
the best
part-
to have. Yeah, that's perfect.
Yeah, the part, and it's already been approved by council. It's just on the list for when they get the money for it. The part that people talk about Douro is the part in the older part of the city, and the road is quite narrow, but people do go quite fast. Yeah. I don't know why.
it feels to pedestrians, it feels fast. Like if a car is going 50 on there, it feels like they're really going fast because they're right, they're like a meter away from you and you're on the sidewalk. So yeah, it's a perception too as well when you're a pedestrian as to how safe you feel when your car's going by you at that speed.
Because those sidewalks are also the older sidewalks, and they don't have much of a boulevard, so they don't have much of that sort of complete street where there's a boulevard and hydro poles, and like you basically you have the pedestrian really close to the road, and I think that's another part of it, right? That and unless that road gets reconstructed, it's enforcement. It starts to be enforcement.
There's not a lot of real estate to
No.
change the layout as well.
Yeah, there's a lot of older trees and things too along
Right.
there.
And it's part of one of the major bus routes too, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, there's a bus along there.
It's like some of the other streets. It's a straight shot. There's there are no traffic lights, no stop signs. They're from Romeo back all to Downey.
Speed bumps are effective and hated.
I think there's only one a stop sign along that route.
Yeah.
At Front Street.
Yes. Well, the city really hasn't explored a lot of four-way stops, have they?
That's the other piece of it is now we understand that putting in four-way stops actually makes intersections more dangerous. So it doesn't always slow people down, and it can cause more conflict.
Right, indecision.
Yeah, or aggression or whatever, like rolling through, and pedestrian might assume you're going to stop, and the vehicle would not be necessarily wanting to stop. So.
When we did the school travel planning, and Laura, I don't know if you remember Linda, Laura, who used to, she was very, 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 very pregnant, standing on that corner where there's the there's a whole pile of four-way stops around Romeo School. I don't know if anybody knows that, right? And all that happens is people roll through them, and they roll through them when there are children off school and walking across. We had her stomping in her boots and her big winter coat and her clipboard, kind of coming back going, apoplectic with the number of people who roll through four-way stops because they're in a hurry. So that's the thing. It's counterintuitive. You would think that series of four-way stops would make people stop and think. What they do is they make them impatient. And then what they find, which is interesting, is they find the speeds in between the four-way stops get really fast. So people actually will accelerate through them and then come to a screeching halt. And so so many of these things keep coming back to enforcement. And once you start ticketing people constantly, they modify their behavior.
Or you go to the Toronto route and put a bunch of speed bumps. Which people will not be happy about.
No, but I would imagine some people treat speed bumps in the same way. You slow down, you accelerate, slow down, accelerate.
Yeah.
It's hard to change behavior.
I
Yeah.
know in the past, that the stop signs don't slow people down, but they have been used in the past, successfully or not, I don't know, as trying to get traffic to avoid the street as opposed to take the street.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was a couple decades ago. I used to live off Young Boulevard, and that was like every block there was a stop sign to keep people from cutting off from Young Street over to Young Boulevard. So it was a real pain to drive.
South Kingsway in Etobicoke is another one. But it funded, I think, two major police depots.
I was just
Now, I had a friend who was walking the streets of Stratford. I haven't heard anything back from her. I'll ask her tomorrow if she's done anything much in the southeast and have any recommendations to send along. I'll send along to Nancy to include on the list.
The only other point of brainstorm there that occurs to me is any very large workplaces where potentially a lot of people might work in town. So no, we usually look at schools, but possibly workplaces too. But I'm not very familiar with what destinations you might be able to entice people to start, walking to work if the infrastructure was there.
The only other
I
thing.
don't know if it hits.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I don't know if it hits our purview is access to some of the, like the Festival Mall and some of the other places. There's sidewalks around them, but there's no way to get from the sidewalk in safely, or there's no guided routes in.
It's all parking lot.
Yeah. And drive-through lanes.
So,
Yes.
this is where we don't actually have much control over existing private, but what we do have is input on site plan. And so for any new parking lots that go in, I think there already are better standards on pedestrian, walkways and things like that. But maybe one of the things is, it's sort of not part of, flagging gaps in sidewalks, but maybe we could have at an upcoming meeting, someone from planning come and talk about what are some of the standards that we're using in some of those site plan approvals, and where there might be some examples from other municipalities that build better pedestrian, or maybe there are some better examples where council could then, change some of those guidelines and stuff. I don't know. That's just a thought, but it's true. Some of our parking lots are some of the worst ones for encouraging pedestrians. Maybe that's something we can add.
This is not really related, but was this committee responsible for closing down Lakeside or suggesting to close down Lakeside in the summer?
Yeah.
No, just two of the councillors.
Just us. Yeah, that because we weren't meeting in the last spring. So, yeah.
I thought that was a great idea. I was a little disappointed that stopped.
Yeah, I think it was successful.
I think so too. And I think a lot of other communities did that during COVID, and it's not a bad idea. It gets people to appreciate slowing things down, and we don't need a car everywhere.
There is an outstanding report coming from engineering on the whole, like both the traffic flow and speeds and safety issues around. And it should include cycling. I don't know the status of that, but if you want, I can ask Ed when that was something that came out of last year's road closures, was also a request from council for staff to look at improvements in the park system for safety. So I think it was that plus the the swamp that got hit, and it was a number of different things to look at it. So that should be a report coming back. I just don't know exactly when.
But I think it was great to get people out.
I really enjoyed watching the little kids learning how to ride their bikes up and down there. It was great.
Should be the goal of active transit. I think it was a good idea.
Yeah, that my hope would be, and I've suggested this a number of times, I would love to see that being a one-way, but a narrow car lane, and then a nice big active transportation cycling lane, pedestrian spaces, and even really you could add more parking along that stretch. There's space for it to be configured differently, and no one lives along there, so you don't have the portion of people that would be like, no, you can't change my street. Although everybody seems to have some ownership in that Lakeside Drive, but anyway, yeah, it would be nice. I think it would, even with theater traffic, I think it would still work to have that as a one-way personally, but I'm not an engineer either, which I sometimes am reminded, but I like to dream.
There's so
The
many
other,
creative things you can do, actually,
Yeah.
down. You can even make like food trucks lined up and make it very festive as well on the weekends.
if the park board approved that, yeah, we could.
Yes.
They were pretty flexible for COVID. So who knows? I mean, now that we've tried some of these things, maybe people would be more open to it because they see, oh, it's possible and it's really not so bad.
Well, it's great if you live in the neighborhood, but I think you have to accommodate people driving in, that they can park somewhere and be able to take advantage of that as well.
Right.
I know it's not quite on, it is the accessibility side of things, as some of our neighbors are walking around with walkers, and they've been having issues with the snow clearing. They come through and they clear, and then it gets all messed up again, and there's no sort of follow-up to see that one side of Devon is particularly is worse than the other. I don't know if that's actually part of our accessibility suggestions into the.
Maybe this is an opportunity to have Mike Bites we have a snow and sidewalk ice campaign thing could get sent out every year about once the little snow plow goes by, maybe everybody could get out with their shovel and help get it. The plows can't go all the way down. They can't, they would break up. Well, they also flip, and you can, the driver can get hurt, but we had this whole idea of trying to encourage people to help clear the last little bit for pedestrian. And some people are really all over it, like, oh, come on, we can do this. I can't imagine why people aren't there with, and other people like, this is what I pay taxes for, and then you have Hamilton, which has a very active group of citizens with disabilities that are doing hashtag AOTA fails. Has anyone seen that on Twitter? Yeah. So they are really angry because the city isn't doing the clearing, but then citizens aren't doing the clearing, but then the city isn't doing the clearing. So the citizens are supposed to do the clearing and nobody does the clearing. So this group goes around all over Hamilton taking pictures of where a wheelchair can't go and then hashtagging it with AOTA fail. So it is a constant issue, but at one point we were issuing every year this challenge to people to help out and go and get it well enough for people to walk. I think I don't know that we did it last year, but I think maybe we can ask Mike to reissue that again. It's just something that we do every year, but it really does involve people being good neighbors, unfortunately. Right?
Well, for those people who aren't willing to comply, you look at some communities like Kitchener-Waterloo, the city does not clear the sidewalks. Every homeowner is responsible for the sidewalk that goes by their property. So I think it's great that the city does clear it, and I don't think it's a big ask of the residences. Sure, some residences cannot based on their physical ability, but I think the neighbors doing a little bit extra, along the sidewalk is not a big ask again, especially when people have snow blowers. It makes it really easy.
And I'll say there are some parts of the city that are really, like, I don't know, Elizabeth Street, you ever walk down that street? Like, they are amazing, right? Like every single, like this little snow, the city plow will go by and then somebody goes out there and gets it down to pavement. I think that was Judy Ty actually who started that challenge to her neighbors. And then you'll have other sections of the city where nobody will go out and do anything. So again, it's an education piece for sure.
I think a couple of my neighbors would prefer the snowplow not come down the sidewalk. They've been tearing up the grass a little bit.
And you know why that is? Because sidewalks are different widths.
The wrong size plows.
No, we have, we
Yeah.
have the old sidewalks that are narrow. We have the AOTA compliant sidewalks that are wider, and then you have the different ages of plows. And sometimes you have a plow that's a little wider, but why would you buy a narrower plow when you have AOTA? It's just, constant.
I'm thinking about
Well,
Devon Street.
I'm amazed at some of the drivers.
Yeah.
I'm amazed at some of the drivers. They're the bouncing that they go through, and they still keep it mostly online. It's pretty amazing.
You
I was
can
going to ask you, David, you live on Devon? Is that
Yep,
right? And
that's
Wayne
right.
does. Wayne does as well.
So does Lee.
Oh, you're all on the same street.
Yeah,
I was curious, are there sidewalks on both sides the whole way?
Just one.
Right.
There's one sidewalk down at Romeo, and the new sidewalk starts at Pleasant and heads all the way down to all the way around.
Yeah, because that seems a little bit problematic to me too. It's because that's a busy street as well. It's a secondary street and it's got a lot of traffic. You'd think is that somewhere else we want to flag at looking at missing sidewalks there?
Well, you'd need to make sure a lot of the houses on the south side where there is no sidewalk, they are fairly close to the street again. So it's where the city line is, where the property line is, whether there's enough room.
I'm happy to let them expropriate my land for that. That's fine. That's one, but 100 left. But there's also Willow south of there too, where there are no sidewalks for a good chunk of Willow as well. So I don't know if that would be.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's on the list. Like all those streets, you notice the one got done. Those streets actually still have. I know they're not really ditches. I think there's a proper name. I grew up on a farm. They're ditches, but they don't actually have proper drainage. That for some reason, when that land came into the city from the township, a lot of those streets, like they have to be completely reconstructed because they don't have linkages to like the storm sewer and all that kind of stuff. So they're not just missing sidewalks, they're missing curbs, they're missing drainage. So I don't know, there's the one street that got done along there and eventually Pleasant. So eventually they're all going to look like Pleasant. Yeah. They're just working their way through.
As they upgrade it. Yeah. That's good.
And
That's
David,
on the radar.
I was going to say, David, so if your neighbors have had their lawn like dug up, all they have to do is call the city, and there is a crew that goes around and fixes the grass in the spring. I forget, after April, there's some date in April where they're sure there won't be any more snow. They'll start fixing the grass for them if they call.
Yeah. The other one that they've been doing some sidewalk repair, and they've excavated on both sides of the sidewalk, and then they left a gap behind that never got filled in. So a couple of the people with the motorized scooters and the walkers have to be very careful going through there because there's a good 3 or 4 inch drop off into a ditch on the side of the sidewalk. So it's one of those things I was planning on flagging to the sidewalk people once the spring comes, and we'll see what it looks like. So okay, any other suggestions of locations for the meeting, or shall we move on?
That's it.
Any other business to bring up? No. Okay, the last item is a motion for adjournment. Anybody care to make that motion? Oh, Kathy? Second? Wayne?
Yes.
Okay. All in favor? Okay. Thank you all, and see you next month, if not before.